I'm Megan Riley with West Edge Design Fair, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. From civic architecture to jazz, each of our guests today bring hidden stories to light. Chris Roman designed a modernist fire station in Richmond, Virginia. Authors Edward Dimenberg and Crosby Doe share the story of the breakout project for Richard Neutra, the Lovell Health House in Los Angeles. Holland Murphy investigates architectural myths, separating rumor from fact to reveal the truth behind landmark designs. Finally, from Northwest Arkansas, we welcome our musical guest, Claudia Burson. And now, your host revealing the truth behind why preservation campaigns so frequently fail, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I get calls from people who want to save a special building in their city that a developer wants to tear down. These well-meaning preservationists have written sternly worded letters to the city council. In the nicest way, though, they've vilified the developer, who they've decided they shouldn't even meet with because it might compromise their generally uninformed position. Their online petition has a few hundred signatures. They've formed a loose coalition with a few other groups who share their opinion. They've gone on social media. They've shown up and spoken at a few public hearings. And they want U.S. Modernists to help them get the word out, which we're always glad to do. But a year later, when I check in on how it all turned out, almost all of them lost their fights, badly. The buildings are gone. Plus, apparently, there's no learning. They haven't developed an ounce of capacity to fight for the next building. To a person, they say, there was nothing else we could do. So sad. Not because they lost, but because there was plenty they could do. They just didn't want to do it. Historic preservation attracts creative people who love old buildings but generally have no idea how to win a preservation fight. They avoid direct talks with developers that could result in compromises well before public hearings. They are reluctant to spend the first nickel on outside experts or legal counsel. They're reluctant to even ask attorneys on their boards to do background research for free. Their passive tactics create awareness but seldom win because developers have staff, attorneys, land use consultants, PR people, and deep pockets who are going to run out the clock until our passionate, heartfelt, homespun advocates are too busy with the rest of their lives to care and show up anymore. And cities, rightly or wrongly, are driven largely by development. Laws and local landmark ordinances provide frameworks for protection, but only if advocates learn that process, assure their own legal standing, and get counsel early on to argue procedure at public hearings and in court. Simply sitting down with developers early on to work out compromises can avoid months or years of conflicts. City councils and other government bodies are constantly breaking their own rules, and you can call them out on that as a tactic to win. These are among the strategies I advise groups who are more interested in winning than trying to win, because generating petitions and sternly worded letters, while easy, inexpensive, and comfortable, is like showing up to a boxing match with no gloves. If you're doing that, you're just an excited fan holding up a clumsily drawn sign in the cheap seats. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Brent R. Harris Charitable Trust, restorer of Richard Neutra's Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs, and 6 other houses in California. By the E. Fay Jones Conservancy, preserving the legacy of modernist architecture in Northwest Arkansas. efayjonesconservancy.org. And by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Architect Chris Roman oversees civic projects with Mosley Architects in Richmond, Virginia. With a 2008 architecture degree from Virginia Tech,
Go Hokies!
The firm's latest project is Richmond's Fire Station 12. Replacing a building built in the 1940s, the sleek modernist building has 17,000 square feet, including an impressive red fire ladder sculpture that can be viewed from the street. Plus, the building solves a health problem unique to firefighters. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Chris, before we talk about the building, let's talk about the neighborhood. I mean, this is basically ground zero for the Confederacy, right? I mean, this was where the whole Confederacy organization was running from during the Civil War.
Indeed, it was. And I'll tell you what, Richmond certainly has a dynamic culture with the Confederacy coming up through the Civil War. But when you walk downtown at this point, especially through this neighborhood, which is called Carytown, that neighborhood has kind of completely transformed to what you would deem the Old South, to a very vibrant art and restaurants neighborhood, very walkable, and we'll say a lot of young people are starting to move to that area these days. It certainly is a transformation from what one would think from Richmond's, very diverse past.
One of the buildings that I really like quite a bit in Richmond is the old train station downtown.
Mm-hmm.
When you take Amtrak through town, you stop there. That was a rehab use project from, I think, about 25 years ago. And now we're looking at how the fire stations are being modernized all around the city. The visual of this building, this is Fire Station 12, and people can Google this online. The visual of this is just really stunning. I mean, you look at this and go, wow. And not as just a great fire station, but just a great building. So tell me how you got the clients to go along with this very neat design.
Well, I'll tell you what, a little interesting fact about the Main Street station there is my wife is actually an interior designer, and she was actually an interior designer for the firm who worked on that building back in the day. So that was, I got to see a little bit of that behind the scenes too, and that's definitely quite a really striking space. So a shout out to, I'll say SMBW Architects, who I know did that. Going back to the fire station on Cary Street. This is an interesting project from a design perspective. Whenever you're designing fire stations, one of the things is you don't want to look for high design right away. What the first and foremost thing about this is the functionality of a fire station. If it doesn't function, then it's not doing its job. There's certain things that come into play, such as the health and welfare of the occupants in there. Yes, that's our job as architects, is to look out for those. But the first responders have a much higher risk of cancer as well as stress-related illnesses than the general population. So these are some of the things that we wanted to address, and we made sure was first and foremost. So in essence, form follows the function in a fire station is kind of the hierarchy in which things need to happen. So one of the challenges on this site, it was a very tiny and skinny site. A lot of fire stations, everything now these days, if you have the land, you want to have everything on the same level to reduce the travel time from where firefighters are sleeping or hanging out in the day room.
But there's no pole. There's no pole.
Where's the pole and all that?
Oh, yes, there is.
Oh, yeah?
There definitely is.
Oh, cool.
Yes, there is. And I'll tell you what, there is, at least in Station 12, there is a pole, and there are two poles because the station is 3 stories in a mezzanine, so basically 4 levels. And it is strongly suggested by OSHA that you only go 2 floors. So that way you're not sliding down and breaking ankles. So there actually is a slide pole that goes down 2 floors and then another one that goes down 2 floors as well to be able to transfer there. So there are 2 poles within Station 12. But
okay.
To your point about all those other stations, the brand new stations that have enough land, yeah, there's no poles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as we said in the intro, firefighters have a unique health problem from contamination when they're fighting the fires, because you never know what's going to be in these buildings, right? So how do they deal with that when they get back to the fire station?
So the layout of the fire station is divided into hot, warm, and cold zones. The hot zone is where your apparatus bays are, the dirty zone, essentially. And you could almost assimilate it to a garage at your house. You know, you're going into the garage, your car's there. You don't want to bring in all the, say, snow or whatever else you're getting off of your cars. But take that to the next level is, likely these firefighters just came from an accident on the highway, with, different types of fluids that potentially will get on their turnout gear. If they're coming from a structure fire, obviously there's a lot of carcinogens and soots and things like that are getting on their turnout gear. So the first and foremost
turnout
is to
gear
design
is
a building.
their equipment. What's turnout gear?
Their equipment, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
the turnout gear is, the big fire suits.
Okay, got it.
They're the suits that have the fire-resistant materials on, as well as the SCBA gear, which is your breathing
Respirator
apparatus.
kind of device?
Yep,
Okay.
all of that. Yep. The idea is to set this up for them to be successful in decontaminating themselves. Decontamination is key here. So you get back from a call, you will go to a room, a decontamination room, where you're going to be able to take all of this gear off. And typically what we'll find is in the case of Station 12, is a big extractor, which is basically a huge washer for this gear, because each set of gear is about 80 pounds. So you think about that, say you have 4 people on a shift and you have 320 pounds worth of gear that this washer has to carry.
How big is this washer?
It's pretty big.
I guess. Is there just one?
Depends on the station. In a lot of those stations that you're able to spread out a little bit more, you might have 2 extractors, but they end up being pretty expensive. But each extractor can probably carry up to 2 things of gear at once.
Okay.
So, you've got that washing in there, and you think about, just from an engineering perspective, centrifugal force going around with something that's, say 100 some pounds. You're not just putting a washer in there. You're definitely looking at some reinforced slabs and some pretty hefty bolts into the slab to make sure this thing doesn't walk around.
Yeah,
Right.
when that thing starts to spin, you wouldn't want it to start wobbling like, home washers do, because it'll just tear through a wall.
Yeah, you're gonna get a little bit different.
Then you'd be
results.
calling a firefighter to help you get it fixed.
Now, does it dry these things too? I mean, I'm just asking, is it a washer dryer?
No, actually, in this, it's not a dryer. They do make them for some of the lighter sets of gear. However, what is typical is there's usually a drying cabinet. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a cabinet that's wide enough to be able to hang up your gear, and there's basically a little blower. That
Drip
goes
dry.
through
It's
there
a drip
that
dry
slowly
kind of
dries.
operation. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
And so that washes that gear. So from a decontamination standpoint, that's the first step there.
Okay.
So, you get back from a call and all this. That's not the only place that all these carcinogens and things like that get on your skin. Think about if you've ever been in the snow and
All that dirt.
say it's that really light powder, and even if you had a mask on, guess what gets hit right in here in your neck? You'll feel that snow if you fall into it, if you've been skiing, or like right around your gloves. That's no different for first responders, is those are locations that are very vulnerable to attracting more carcinogens. So what we do is we also provide a decon shower near, or ideally right off of that decon room, so a firefighter can go straight from the first decon phase to the next one, where they actually take a shower as soon as they get back.
Okay.
It's a concept called shower within the hour, which significantly reduces the number of carcinogens that are going to be tracked back into their living area. Because remember, it's not just a place of work. They live there.
Yeah, right. Now, is this the kind of technology that's recently developed, or have they been having to deal with this issue for decades?
So it's come to the forefront within the last 10 to 15 years.
Okay.
And a lot of that is driven by all of these cancer-related deaths, late 40s, early 50s, occupational.
Everybody that was involved in 9/11.
Yeah.
Everybody
Exactly,
working the pile.
100%. This has been something that has been starting to come to the forefront. And it's not just about the studies. You also have to have buy-in from the users. And if the users aren't buying into a system, it's never going to be successful. So recently, probably the past 5 or 6 firehouses that we've done, the users have been very great, and because they want to take care of their own. Firefighters are brethren. It's a pretty strong bond. My dad was actually a volunteer firefighter, and which when I realized when I was younger, I wanted to be a firefighter, but I was too much of a wimp to do it. So so this is what I'm doing instead.
That's how you serve.
All those ex-firemen become architects, so don't worry.
How many fire stations have you guys done?
Oh, probably a couple dozen. Going back to me personally, I think I've at least worked on 10 to 12 at this point. A lot of them in and around the Richmonds and in Virginia in particular. Our firm has done quite a few across the Carolinas as well, all the way into South Carolina. And we're trying to poke up into Maryland a little bit. But it's definitely something we do within our civic sector that kind of falls underneath our umbrella. from a personal note, it's one of my favorite building types. So,
Chris, I am, of course, fascinated by all this. So let's say I'm a fireman. I've just come back from a big warehouse fire. I pull the truck in. I have my gear on. I go in the decontamination room, put my gear into this giant washer, and then I go into the decon shower and get stuff all off of me very quickly. Now, where are my clothes? What am I changing into at this point? I'm naked in the decon shower.
Oh, you didn't know all firemen hang out naked. That's,
we won't tell HR any of this,
good.
but now, that actually is a question that actually does come up. And that goes back to having an organization that is all in on this philosophy.
Yeah.
And what that means is having, 4 or 5 sets of clothes of various sizes to be able to put on after that, for you to actually get back up to your room, to your bunk rooms,
Okay.
or where, or to the day room.
So like some generic sweatpants
Yes.
are in a pile,
Yeah.
right? And sweatshirts, and you can just pile them on
Yep.
and then hop upstairs.
Yeah.
right. And pet the Dalmatian.
There you go. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Do they have Dalmatians in fire stations anymore?
They kind of got out of that. Dogs can be kind of a pain.
Well,
Yeah.
Dalmatians
but I will
especially
say,
are kind of high maintenance.
Yeah.
yeah, especially Dalmatians. I had a cousin who had one, and I think she had more in vet bills for that thing than. But I will say, on the outside of this is a LEED gold building. We're shooting for gold. The contractor still has to turn in the rest of the paperwork. But outside for our bike racks, they are fashioned in the shape of a Dalmatian, which we're pretty excited about. So.
Very nice.
So what's this impressive red fire ladder sculpture that's outside the station? Who made that?
Inside.
That is,
Oh.
It's inside and out. It's actually outside on a covered porch, a 2-story covered porch.
Okay.
So this fire station ladder was hired by the city of Richmond. They had hired it's an organization called a Gang of Three. They're actually out of Raleigh, I believe. And
Oh, yeah. William Dodge.
Yes, yeah. William Dodge, and they were hired by the city of Richmond because the city of Richmond has dedicated all these public projects. 1% of the budgets go to public art. And,
Wow.
as I started to talk before regarding this neighborhood that this building is in, it was an opportunity to kind of showcase some of the art. They had hired the Gang of Three about midway through, about in DDs, and we started to work with them and try to figure out, okay, what does this building want to be? Where do we want to put this art, and what kind of story do you want to tell? So the Gang of Three took this opportunity as this big 2-story space to do this abstract of a ladder, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty neat. And but then also dive a little deeper into the history that we talked about with the city of Richmond, and put on some of the glass, some actual super graphics on the glass that are visible, especially at night from the outside, silhouettes of the first female firefighter who was actually stationed at that station, as well as the first black firefighter in the city of Richmond. So
And that would be Barbara Hicks and Ronald Lewis.
Ooh. Okay.
correct.
Yes.
That is right.
We did our homework.
Yeah.
Richmond has an incredible art museum. So this all kind of syncs together as far as I'm concerned.
The contemporary art, yeah.
Yep.
That one's amazing.
On my last question, I hear a rumor that there's a Lego model of this station.
Oh,
I was waiting for you to ask that. Yes, it's actually downstairs just below me of where I'm sitting right now. We actually had it built for a conference. It's the Virginia Association of Counties. We were there last week. We're trying to think of what would be something that's just different that would, gain some conversation, and start to spur on, these conversations that we're even having today. We're like, what about Legos? So we had that built, and I'll say probably the luckiest person in our office took a week. And the week before, leading up to this conference, actually got to go to work and build Legos. And it was amazing.
Was that you? Were you the
That
lucky
was not
person?
me, unfortunately.
Oh,
so did you use like parts from like spaceships or Lego flowers or all the other things they make or do they have a firehouse Lego set?
You can get a program where you can actually build your own custom Lego sets. And this program, once you build it, we took our SketchUp model and was able to kind of overlay what these blocks were. What it does is it allows you to decide do you want to use this block because it's readily available, or this custom one. And then you're able to basically build this out of Legos in a virtual space. Then it also makes directions for you to make it a lot easier. So
Yes.
then the next thing was sourcing all the Legos, which you got to source from a few different places, unless you go straight to Lego, which is pretty expensive. So
Lego does not
But,
offer this design build thing? Is it somebody else?
I don't remember offhand whether it's Lego sanctioned or not. So
Okay.
hopefully nobody from Lego's listening.
Yes, it might be a renegade Lego operation, Tom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I assume, Chris, that people had so much fun knowing about, building, or seeing this model. Are you guys going to do it again for a future project?
Yes, I think we are. So, it definitely was well received from the model, but what, some of the opportunities we're looking to do, instead of it just sitting downstairs, we're going to look for opportunities to potentially put it on display in a little bit more public places, and maybe potentially even auction it off at some point to help a firefighter charity for cancer or something like that along the line. So, we're looking to use this for more than just something pretty that's going to sit there, because it's got some value to it. It's got a lot of community
appeal.
Community appeal. Thank you. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Might as well kind of take advantage of that while we can.
Now, Chris, for people that want to drive by, what's the address of Fire Station 12?
It's at the corner of Carey Street and Addison Streets in the city of Richmond. It is 2223 West Carey Street.
Chris, this has been really fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing the story of Firehouse 12.
Thank you guys for having me.
We were talking with architect Chris Roman.
The Lovell Health House in Los Angeles was designed by architect Richard Neutra. Perched on a steep hillside with panoramic views, the house pioneered the use of concrete and steel in residential design and advanced the ideals of open-air living. It became an instant celebrity and was widely published, elevating it in the history of modernism and catapulting Neutra's career for many more commissions. We have today two co-authors of a new book, Richard Neutra and the Making of the Lovell Health House. Edward Dimenberg is a professor of humanities at UC Irvine and served as the first multimedia editor at the Journal of the Society of Architectural Historians. Returning podcast guest Crosby Doe is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of modernist realtors, going into his 51st year using the Force to assure that mid-century modernist houses end up in good hands instead of the landfill. He was guest number 3, I believe, when we started the podcast. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good to be here. Happy to be here.
Crosby, as I recall, your first major sale as a modernist realtor 51 years ago was another Neutra house. Which one was that?
It was, and it literally, along with a little guidebook by David Gebhardt and Robert Winter called A Guide to Architecture of Southern California, changed my life. The first house I represented was a house by Richard Neutra known as the Loring House. And it was 1 bedroom and a den house. What was remarkable about it is that I was sitting there in open houses. And while I was sitting there, I had to ask myself why I felt so good. And it dawned on me it was the architecture itself which contributed to that in a big way. And with that, and with the little book in hand, published by the LA County Museum of Art, I said to myself, well, I'm going to get out of real estate and get into architecture. And it's been a wonderful experience.
And your firm has specialized in modernist houses for all this time. How many modernist houses do you think you've helped change hands?
Well, I never think about volume, but if you think of maybe 8 to 10 a year, that might be 500-600 houses.
That's pretty great.
We've never captured them all. We've actually documented about 8,000 worthwhile properties, including major condominiums by Gregory Ain and people of that nature. But fortunately, in Los Angeles, we're blessed with a lot of great architecture.
Why was the book commissioned?
Well, I was honored to represent and sell the house. I had been aware of it for most of my career, and as a matter of fact, been in touch with Betty Topper for all the years of my career. But as I traveled around the world, I saw many, many references when I went to various bookstores or libraries, and one picture of the Lovell Health House, and maybe a sentence about it. I felt that this would be a very important way of helping to preserve these icons and bring the attention of the public to their continuing importance today, and not just as a historical object, but as a wonderful lifestyle that gives you a unique and very pleasing way to live.
Now, Ed, tell me how this project started to document the Lovell Health House.
I am a historian of Weimar Germany. I've worked on the cultural and intellectual history of the period. In 1994, I co-edited a book called the Weimar Republic Source Book that since then has become recognized as a standard collection of documents related to that extraordinary period of cultural and intellectual ferment, during which in architecture, the Bauhaus, of course, was so important. I later found out about this project through Nicholas Olsberg. Nicholas Olsberg is a collaborator on the book together with Crosby. And I was excited by the prospect of contributing a chapter, Neutra's complex relationship to German architecture culture at the time. That is to say, the publications for which he wrote, the articles he wrote, and the ways in which he was able to be a mediator between Europe and the United States. During the period, he designed, constructed, and promoted the Lovell Health House.
What was really unusual about the client at the time? What was Lovell up to that had him want to commission something like this?
Lovell was a writer. He wrote actively for the Los Angeles Times Magazine, and he promoted the idea that living indoors and outdoors was a major health benefit. He was also a vegetarian, and he believed, I think, way ahead of his time in nude sunbathing and getting all the vitamin D that he could. So basically, he came to Neutra and he wanted to develop those theories of better living into a house. And I think this is one of the great successes, that it did achieve that. And actually, in terms of indoor-outdoor living, presented a fantastic model moving forward into the future. From that to Neutra's plywood house, and that had a direct connection with even the case study house. That program is celebrated as really bringing to the general public the modern California lifestyle.
For me, there are two important historical contexts related to the concern of the house with health. The first is the contemporaneous interest in well-being among European modern architects. Le Corbusier was very interested in health. There's a famous film called L'Architecture aujourd'hui, Architecture Today by Pierre Chenal, in which on the rooftop of one of his houses, one sees people practicing calisthenics. The interest in health was not simply related to vanity. Tuberculosis was a genuine threat to public health at the time. Modernists such as Le Corbusier were working. And it was one very much in the minds of an architect such as Alvar Aalto, for example, whose Pamio Sanitarium was roughly contemporaneous with the Lovell Health House. So, part of what Neutra was doing was extending this legacy of a concern of modern architecture with health, with well-being, with the body to a California setting. But I think one also needs to recognize, I'll be, quite blunt about this. In my opinion, at least, Philip Lovell was a quack. We would perhaps today call him a fraud. He had no medical training, but he was able to play upon the tremendous interest in health and well-being that, of course, is a constant. It's a fact of life in Southern California today. And it had really begun in the 1870s when the railroad connection made it possible for people with tuberculosis to arrive in Los Angeles. And these so-called one-lungers brought with them a concern with staying healthy, a concern with breathing what at the time at least was clean air. And Neutra was able to pick up on this cultural current. So I think, for me, the Lovell Health House is a fascinating fusion of European modern concerns with health and the body, and a Southern California concern with healthy lifestyles.
Now, Crosby, tell our listeners about the site where the house is.
It's interesting that this is one of the early houses where Neutra was building the slope. It's a southern-facing steep slope that abuts up behind Griffith Park, or in front of Griffith Park, and overlooks the city. So it's in what's known as the Los Feliz area today.
And did he have the lot already when he hired Neutra?
I believe he did, yes.
Okay. So he had this beautiful lot up in the hills looking down, and the building itself, because I've been in it a couple of times, it's really astonishing how each level has its own personality. So talk to me more about that.
I think that it was consciously designed for basically a formal public area, which is the middle level. That was where guests were received. They're actually received on the upper level, but two doors completely closed off the entry from the bedrooms. So a guest would come in from the upper level and come down to the open plan living, dining, and library area, which was quite dramatic. And then on the lower level, there was a pool and a pool house and cabanas.
Now, Ed, how long did the Lovells live there?
Crosby can give you the exact figure, but my recollection is they lived 6 years in the house until about 1935. Is that correct, Crosby?
You know, I don't recall offhand. I'd have to look up my notes. But I do know that the owners that I represented, the Toppers, were there for a good 50 years.
So they came along next, and tell us about the Toppers.
Well, they were a family, 3 children. The husband was a physician, I believe. He passed away, and the family, Betty Topper, although she was uncomfortable to begin with, became fiercely protective of the house. And even though they had minimal means to keep it up, they did no harm, and she kept the house pretty much original throughout the time, and the whole family became pretty attached to the house, with one of the sons living there all the way through the time it was sold.
And when was that?
It must be about 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago, okay. And in that time the Toppers owned it, the house became quite the Hollywood star. It was in movies and television commercials. What are some of the places it showed up in popular culture?
It appeared in the film L.A. Confidential. And for me, significantly, the home of the villain is situated in the Lovell Health House. So what we find in the film is a very common, I would say, almost archetypal representation of modern architecture as a setting for evil and malevolent characters. The character is really a pimp. A murder takes place in the house. One sees a very expensive car in the garage, modern paintings on the wall. So the house is associated with criminality, with decadence. And this is in marked contrast to a later film called Beginners, in which the house is the domicile of a gay museum professional played beautifully by Christopher Plummer. And in that film, one sees the house as a locus of domesticity. Plumer and his family, his circle of gay friends live in the house. They have parties, they socialize there, and it's a very domestic environment. So for me, this has always been very intriguing that the house has these two poles. On the one hand, it can exude sophistication, a certain European flair. On the other hand, it can be homey, domestic, and a place where one can live comfortably and relax with family and friends.
I just always thought that the evil masterminds had better taste. But, that's me.
That very well could be true.
As this house came along in the 30s and 40s, how did it influence Los Angeles design?
I would say, for me, this is the single most influential modern house in Los Angeles before the Eames House in 1949. Perhaps together, Crosby knows much more about Frank Lloyd Wright and the reception of Wright around the world than I do, but I would say together with Schindler's House and a few of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings, especially the textile block houses, such as the Millard House. The Lovell Health House was the building that was probably even more than those other houses. It was incredibly well represented in the international architecture press, and this reverberated and I think came back to Los Angeles. One of the unfortunate consequences of the Lovell Health House is it led to so many imitations and to so many knockoff designed by far less talented architects. So for better or worse, the Lovell Health House introduced a certain style, the white box with glazed facades, that since then has become ubiquitous in Los Angeles. But maybe Crosby has some ideas on this as well.
Well, it's interesting that it was opened up as a case study house to begin with. It was one of the first where thousands of people were invited to come up to experience the architecture. And literally they did. And back then, this was quite an adventure because the roads were narrow and impassable. They had to have police up there just to help guide people. And that was the initial reception. What happened in terms of awareness is that it brought a public awareness across the country for this type of modernism, and ultimately led a few years later, in 1938, to another case study house, which was known as the Plywood House by Richard Neutra. And that also was open to the public and also provided a format for indoor-outdoor living with wide openings to the garden. In that case, he actually used glass garage doors that were designed for gasoline stations to open the house to the garden.
The Lovell Health House was included in the 1932 exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art that Philip Johnson and Henry Russell Hitchcock curated. And it set a precedent, I think. It was, of course, the first steel frame house built in the United States, but it also gave clients and gave architects ideas about how it was possible to build, how a modern house must look. So I think it's really impossible to overstate the importance of the house being included in that exhibition, which traveled all around the country, including a stop in Los Angeles. It was on display at the Bullock's department store on Wilshire Boulevard. And by going on a tour, first at the Museum of Modern Art, obtaining the imprimatur of that institution, at the time, unquestionably the most influential, probably in the world, certainly in the United States, for the dissemination of modern architecture, and coming back and being on exhibit, the house acquired even more cachet. Its reputation grew even further.
Let's say that someone today wants to build a health house just on their own in their town, something smaller probably than what we have here. What are some of the elements that they would want to include in a healthy house? For instance, operable windows. What are some of the other items they'd want to have?
Well, I must say at the time, Lovell had a very advanced kitchen. And I believe he had one of the first dishwashers ever designed, special devices for preparing vegetables, etc. So I think that one would probably pay most attention to the kitchen. Of course, I think we've gone maybe beyond the Lovell Health House. Ed had said that there were so many knockoffs that I would defer and say that some of the things that happened after the Lovell Health House, which were a more naturalistic way to go, would be someone's influence. So they may look to one of his students, Harwell Harris, for instance, who brought a little warmer aspect to the house. And I think people would demand that nowadays.
The Lovell Health House has a severity about it. I agree with Crosby. Many clients today are interested in houses that are a bit warmer. And today, of course, what it means to live healthily has a completely different significance. It means living in an energy efficient house. It means living in a house with building materials that don't emit any type of gases. Perhaps it means living in a house with solar panels. And I think today health is understood as a total relationship to the environment and a relationship to the earth and to the use of energy, very different from the type of understandings prevalent when Neutra designed and constructed the Lovell Health House.
The book is Richard Neutra and the Making of the Lovell Health House. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
That was George's conversation with Ed Dimenberg and Crosby Doe. Completed in 1962, what is known as the Dallas Roundhouse at 7507 Baxtershire Drive in Dallas is one of the city's most famous mid-century modern homes. As you might guess, it is circular, also single-story and 5,800 square feet. It's kind of a combo of James Bond sophistication and Brady Bunch charm. For decades, it was attributed to architect Bruce Goff, or alternately to Eddie Parker, a Dallas importer and supposed protege of Goff. However, some Belgian graduate students who traveled to Dallas without waffles either revealed that neither Goff nor Parker's names appear anywhere on the original blueprints. Plus, several of Goff's former associates, who are notoriously opinionated, expressed frustration that the home was ever connected to their mentor's legacy. So we're going to delve into the mystery with writer Holland Murphy. She's executive editor of D Magazine, and the D, of course, stands for Dallas. Welcome to the show, Holland.
Thank you so much.
Holland, how did you come across this great mystery story?
It came in the form of an invitation to an arts fundraiser that was being held at the Roundhouse. The invitation was sent to my editor, Tim Rogers, and at the very bottom of it, it had a short description of the Roundhouse. It said, by the way, there are Belgian students who are going to be studying this house in a couple of months, flying 5,000 miles to Dallas to document every inch of this house. And it tickled us. We just thought it was really funny that Belgians were flying all the way to Dallas, Texas to study a house. And so that was where it started. And it was just supposed to be, I was just going to follow the Belgians around for their first visit. It was going to be kind of like a talk of the town piece, just this funny moment where Belgians come to Dallas.
Something like.
Right, fish out of water.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But as I was looking into it, I kept rolling the name Eddie Parker around in my head, trying to remember where I had heard it before. And what happened was that a couple years ago, I wrote a story about Half Price Books in Dallas, which is headquartered here. I don't know if you have them out there in North Carolina, but they're all over the country. They had for several years been in a building that had been owned by Eddie Parker. And I remember one of these Half Price Books guys telling me, if you want a good story, you need to look into Eddie Parker. He was quite a character. So that was really all I knew about Eddie Parker, was that he was strange enough that someone said I needed to look into him. And so once I made that connection, I started looking through the Dallas Morning News archives, and that's kind of where it got really confusing. It was very mucky.
How did the house get attributed to Goff in the first place?
The house, it was completed maybe 1961, 1962. That's another date that kind of rolls around. I'm not sure when it was. And for decades, the house kind of lived under the radar. It was owned by Eddie Parker, and he had his sales associates there. I mean, it had some kind of notoriety, but people didn't really see inside of it that much. But in 1994, it exchanged hands. And the man who bought it, Rex Thompson, has, this vibrant personality, and somehow, and he's a finance professor at SMU, and somehow a student finds out about the house and writes a story about it. That makes its way to D Magazine. D Magazine does a story on it. But the Dallas Morning News, the bigger story was that in 1994, when it exchanged hands, the Dallas Morning News publishes a story written by David Dillon, who is, to this day, the most noted architecture critic that was ever in Dallas. He wrote a story about the Roundhouse. And in that story, Eddie Parker goes on and on about how he studied with Bruce Goff, how they lost touch during the war. The article mentions that Bruce Goff designed the Italian glass mosaics that you find throughout the house. It talks about how the Parker family lived reclusively, and it talked at length about who Bruce Goff was. So that's where it all started. That was kind of like the groundwork for all the stories to come after that. Use that article as source material.
So was Eddie Parker claiming that Bruce Goff designed the house, or that he designed the house?
He claimed that it came from a Bruce Goff sketch, and he implied that they designed it together.
Okay.
And he also talked about Bruce coming to see the house and how he didn't think it would ever actually get built. So he's basically quoting Bruce Goff at some point, saying he just was amazed to see that this got built. He didn't think that I could ever afford this.
So this was claimed by Eddie Parker as a collaboration with Bruce Goff,
yes.
Essentially. Okay. Now, enter the Belgians, like Hercule Poirot, who are going to solve this mystery. What did they dig up?
What's funny is that for decades now, there have been so many stories in so many Dallas publications about this house. And of course, enter Instagram. It just goes, when you get an interesting picture on Instagram, it just goes around the world like wildfire. So if you put in Bruce Goff into Instagram, what you're going to find, you're going to see the Roundhouse living room pop up all over the place. So it's lived this life as a Bruce Goff house for decades, but these Belgians come in, and it turns out it's not much of a mystery at all, because all you have to do is call Bart Prince, one of Bruce Goff's actual proteges, and he just laughed at this idea. When I talked to him after I listened to the Belgians' thesis presentation, and he was like, I thought I told these students to let go of this idea. I can't believe they're actually doing this whole thesis project on this house. This is crazy.
I take it that these Belgians are architecture students?
They are architecture students, yes.
Okay. So they have a valid interest in this.
Yes, their professor had done a tour of Texas architecture and had stopped at the Roundhouse. This was 100 Belgian architects touring around Texas in buses, and they stopped at the Roundhouse.
Wow.
And so their professor had seen the house and realized that it was rumored to be by Bruce Goff, but never confirmed. So they flew all the way over here. They thought they were going to be confirming this connection, but it didn't take long before they realized that it was not true.
So what was the truth? What's the answer to the question of who designed the house?
And that's where things get a little murky, because you could say Eddie Parker designed it. You could say he stole it. You could say that it was technically on the paperwork. It is, I think it's Bob Miller and John Parnell. I'd have to look up my notes.
Now, did he steal it from from Bruce Goff?
What we think had happened, what Bart Prince, Bruce Goff's protege, what he suggested was that Eddie Parker had either taken a photo or had maybe stolen the sketch of the Frank house, which is a house in Sapulpa, Oklahoma. The exterior looks a lot like the roundhouse. The inside is totally different, but the exterior has the same tiled facade. It's a ceramic and glass tile. The house is a semicircle with a round driveway. So it has the same shape to it. But what we think is that he must have taken a picture. He had business dealings. Eddie Parker was an importer, and he had business dealings with the Frank family, who had the Frankoma pottery. And my best guess is that he took a photo of the sketch, went to these young architects and said, "Make me this."
Ah, okay.
But he did pass along that sketch, and it looks like an inverted photo. It's, black background with white sketch on it. And if the students overlaid that image on top of Goff's sketch of the Frank house, and it's the same thing, except it's cropped to cut off Frank house.
Great.
This is some
A little,
spycraft here.
early cut and paste, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But probably the biggest clue that Bruce Goff had nothing to do with this house is that he never repeated a design. He designed about 500 structures, 150 or so of those got made, and none of them look like anything like each other. If you Google his name and look at images, there's no house that resembles each other at all. And this house, the exterior is a carbon copy, really. So that's where Bart Prince got very frustrated, is he was like, this is ridiculous. He would have never designed the same house.
That makes sense. Goff was really known for being very individualistic with his designs, for sure. Now, with all this attention of the article you've written and other articles on this house, they ever offer tours for people to come and see it?
They have not. But the family that is in it right now, I mean, I was kind of holding my breath when I sent them this article. I sent it to them a couple days in advance. I didn't know how they would take it, but they are so in love with the house, and they love the controversy. As it turns out, they were so happy with the article, and they bought the house because they just thought it was cool.
Yeah.
They didn't know who Bruce Goff was. And so I'm sure if, usually home tours in Dallas, they're going to be connected to a charity organization. They had opened it up for a fundraiser. That was the first time that I had gone there. And I'm sure they would be open to that. That's how the Belgian professor saw the house, was that it was the architects from Belgium were touring it. So they're very open to people seeing the house.
Another mystery solved by the Belgians. Thank you, Belgians. Are there any other house mysteries in Dallas that you can think of, modernist or not?
Well, actually, in the same issue, the editor I had mentioned before, Tim Rogers, he wrote about the Mushroom House. It turns out everyone has a different name for this house. It's in Highland Park, which is the most prominent area in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And people were up in arms. It was built, I think, 1999, and people were up in arms when this started going up. It has a wavy copper roof, and it just looks like something out of a fairy tale. And it was built by Tom Workman, who, this is where it was strange, is because our stories kind of overlapped. Tom Workman was a protege of Bruce Goff. And he built this house for him and his wife. And the mystery element to it is that he has kind of disappeared. His children are no longer in contact with him. They have not by their choice. And he has been taken in by caretakers who will not respond to the children. So that's another.
There's a lot of family drama.
Yeah, that's a different kind of mystery. So
I'm looking at it now on Google. It really is an interesting looking house.
Yeah.
I can see why they call it the Mushroom House.
Mushroom House. I think my sister-in-law calls it the Dr. Seuss House. Everyone has a different name for it. But it is soon to be demoed. Clay Cooley, who has a number of car dealerships in Dallas, he bought 3 contiguous properties in Highland Park, and that is one of them. And so presumably those will all be raised, and he will have some new giant mega mansion.
Well, if you want to see this, just look up Tom Workman, Mushroom House on Google, and you'll be able to see pictures of it.
Actually, it looks like it belongs in Middle-earth.
That's right.
Yes, that's true. I haven't heard Lord of the Rings house yet, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, Hobbit house. It only had round doors.
Now, Holland, you live in a different kind of house. It's called the Junelle House, which was a house that you could purchase, kind of a standard set of plans. Tell our listeners about Junelle, because it's a name that I don't think they know.
I think each of these houses were unique. I haven't seen any that look the same, but it was 2 architects. The name Junelle comes from their wives' names. I think they were only around for a few years in the late 50s, early 60s. And a lot of the houses, I'm in East Dallas. That's kind of seems like where most of their houses were. I'm just east of White Rock Lake. And their designs were very mid-century. A lot of the houses in my neighborhood are just simple ranch homes. And you can usually tell the Junelles from the outside. They usually have like a barrier wall outside, a stone wall or brick wall, and have a totally different kind of architecture than the rest of the neighborhood.
I'm on the Junelle site, which is ju-nel.com, and it tells the history of these. Rowley and Wilson formed Junelle Homes in 1959 after working with modernist architect Howard Meyer. There are varying accounts of how long Rowley and Wilson stayed together. In some accounts, Rowley left in 1963, and in others much later. But this is an interesting set of houses because, like many architects around the country, these guys were trying to start a set of homes that could be more easily replicated and had a particular style that would be moderately affordable at the time.
Yeah. You might find more of these unique homes in Preston Hollow area, but so it's a little unusual to find something outside of the ranch home block in my neighborhood, which is a little bit more middle class.
How many Junelle homes are there in Dallas, do you think?
Dallas only has around 30 that are designated, like confirmed Junelles, but Mark Weeks, he's a real estate agent. He got obsessed with Junelles. He realized that his home was a Junelle, and he started driving every street in Dallas, looking up the property records for the ones that looked like they might be Junelle. And I think he's up to 140 something at this point that he is
147.
confirmed.
Yeah.
Wow.
147. Okay.
Do you like your house?
I love my house. It's an odd house because it's kind of a Frankenstein Junelle. It was amazingly, Mark Weeks, he came and toured our house a few months ago. He had just gotten a cache of original blueprints from one of the kids of one of the Junelle architects. And I think they don't say names or addresses on them. And so he was going slowly one by one through the blueprints and trying to record which belonged
matching
to
the
which
names.
house.
Yeah.
Right.
And that night that he toured, he said, I'm going to go look through the blueprints. It'll probably be a few months before I get back to you, but I'm going to try to find yours. And at 11 p.m. that night, my husband and I are laying there and we get an email and we could not sleep the rest of the night. We got the original blueprints. The front looked totally different. We have this kind of like first level roof. The second level didn't have a roof. So it was very different. We just took our laptops, walking around the house, comparing the blueprints and we're like, this was a yard. Our living room was a yard. And
That's so cool. Well, Holland, this has been a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for pursuing this story. It's always great to hear about a modernist mystery.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you contacting me.
Claudia Burson grew up in Fayetteville, Arkansas. She started playing piano at the age of 8, initially in classical music, but her direction changed when a musician from her uncle's band introduced her to jazz. Her formal training continued, and she went on to study classical piano at the University of Arkansas. In 1976, she went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston. A move to Houston followed, marking her career as she played along jazz greats including Lionel Hampton, Charlie Rouse, Arnett Cobb, and Joe Henderson. She returned to Fayetteville, Arkansas in the late 90s and has remained a leading figure in the regional jazz scene. She performs with her trio, with Drew Packard, bass, and Steve Wilkes, drums, and with Ben Harris. The Arkansas Democrat newspaper describes her as the matriarch of jazz. Welcome, Claudia.
Well, thank you.
I didn't know it was such a hot jazz scene down in Arkansas.
Well, we more or less created it like we did in Houston. There was already a jazz scene going on when I moved down there in 78. And then when I moved back here in 98, there were a handful of musicians that were, trying to do something with jazz. And so then, we just started playing together and recording together, and different musicians would move into the area. And then I started teaching at the university in 2000 and met quite a few musicians there, Jim Greason and Rick Salonen. And we continued for the last 25 years to play together and keep it going. Of course, Robert Ginsburg has really been a major help. He's our go-to guy.
Okay.
He has the North Arkansas or Northwest Arkansas Jazz Society. And he started bringing in musicians from New York. And along with him, we created a summer jazz series. And so we had a rhythm house section. We would play behind these different wonderful world-class artists that Robert would bring in. And we did that for about 10 years. So.
Well, let's hear from Claudia. This song is a jazz standard composed in 1942 by Duke Ellington. Here's Claudia with Sea Jam Blues. Claudia, I just love that song. My toes are tapping all the way through it.
Well, yeah, it really swings. That's always a favorite. And it's one that I give my students, right on because it's easy to learn, but not easy to improvise on. I mean, you really have to have something under your belt to do that. But yeah, it's a swinger.
You have seen over the last 25 years the growth of Fayetteville and Bentonville through the expansion of Walmart. What has that done for the music scene there?
Well, it's done quite a lot of good. Right now, there's more of a scene in Bentonville and Rogers area with different clubs opening up. And so that's given us a fairly wide range of places to play. Well, we wish we had a place to do a jam session here, but we have a place in Rogers called the Music Depot that's run by Anthony Ball and Reggie James. And so they have a lot of the students go up there, which we're going to do next week, go up there and headline a jam session. And the students really turn out. It's kind of a distance for them to go, and not all of them have cars, but we just carpool and manage to, get the kids up there, and they have a great time.
When I was in Bentonville last summer, I went to a place called The Momentary, which has a great room on the top of the building. Have you ever played up there?
Are you talking about that new place that's part of the Walton family?
Well, it has the amphitheater there and the old factory. I think it was a sugar factory.
Oh, yeah. I played there. It's been a while. I played in one of their rooms. It wasn't quite finished yet.
Okay.
But we played up there, and they're doing great things.
This next song was written by Eddie DeLange and Louis Alter, first heard in the movie New Orleans in 1947, performed by Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday. It was the theme song for the TV series Frank's Place by Tim Reed, star of WKRP in Cincinnati. This is one of the top 100 shows people believed was canceled too soon. Here's Claudia with Do You Know What It Means to Miss New Orleans? That is a really delightful tune, Claudia. I know it's been covered by a lot of people. Harry Connick, Alison Krauss, Ellis Marsalis, even Jimmy Buffett.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was fortunate to hear Ellis play it up at Crystal Bridges. He came and gave a concert. And, it was just beautiful how he played. It's wonderful. And he had great kids, too. Wynton Marsalis and Branford. I love playing that tune. I play it to this day. It's just a joy to play. It almost plays itself, if you know what I mean.
Well, Claudia, this has been delightful talking with you. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Brent R. Harris Charitable Trust, restorer of Richard Neutra's Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs, and 6 other houses in California. By the E. Fay Jones Conservancy, preserving the legacy of modernist architecture in Northwest Arkansas, efayjonesconservancy.org. And by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Got a guest to suggest for our show? Write her at bobby@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another Lace Up Your Gloves edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.